Hey everyone, it's me Tim, and today I'm going to share 10 tips for your first solo backpacking trip. I've got a lot of experience with solo camping. I did a lot of motorcycle solo camping. Today's video is about backpack camping, but I have a lot to say about solo travel and solo camping. The first tip for your first solo backpacking trip is to go somewhere familiar. Ideally someplace that you've already camped so you know what to expect from that place. Also, being in a spot that is well trafficked will give you a lot of peace of mind. I wouldn't recommend going so far off the beaten path on your first solo trip, just because it can get a little bit scary. You're really up to your own devices and you haven't quite built up your skill set of camping yet. So if you're planning on going solo backpacking, definitely go someplace that's not super remote. And I think that this would really help you have a much better time, have more fun, and be safer. Tip number 2 is to share your plans with somebody. Number 1, this is important because if you do go missing, people will know where to look for you and they know what time to expect you back, so they'll know when to start calling the search party. But also, this is going to give you a world of peace of mind. I've always found that just checking in with somebody, letting them know where I'm heading, if I'm going to be out for a couple days, to cell service, just let them know, hey, this is where I'm going and I'll be gone this long and I am expected to be back to civilization around this day at this time. Just something to give you that peace of mind of knowing that you do have a safety net and someone that's looking out for you if you do happen to disappear or get lost or anything of that nature. Tip number 3, this isn't necessarily just for solo backpacking, but any backpacking in general, but I'm going to include this tip, and that is to pack light. It's really easy to fall into the trap of planning for your fears and just packing everything you can possibly think you might ever need. But the reality is you probably need a lot less than you think you do, and you could probably get away with a lot less. So just pack light. It's going to make your hiking experience much safer. You're less likely to get injured carrying less weight, and it's just going to be more enjoyable for you. And your stamina is going to be better, so you're not going to be completely wiped out by the time you get to camp and have to set up for the night. Tip number 4 is to master your skills of camping. This is things like building a campfire or setting up your tent. If you've never set up your tent, I recommend doing it in your backyard the first time, or somewhere where you can just practice and take your time, not somewhere where you're literally setting up for the night. There's horses around here, I thought I heard one. Anyways, set up your tent before you leave for your first camping trip so you know how it works and you know how to set it up. So just knowing, basic first aid, survival skills. You don't have to be an absolute expert, a pro, but you should be familiar with things that are important to know when you're camping, the different skill sets. And you'll get better as you go, and you'll learn a lot as you go. But it's a good idea to be familiar with some of that stuff if you're going to be alone and completely self-reliant. Tip number 5 is to be wildlife aware. Make sure that you're doing the right thing with your food, hanging a bear bag if necessary, or using a bear canister, whatever the regulations are in that area, but definitely at the very least hanging a bear bag. Number 1, this is good because when bears start to associate humans with food, they can become aggressive and eventually they may need to be euthanized, which is not ideal. So it's for their safety as much as it is for your safety, but it's also going to give you a lot of peace of mind at night when you're laying in your tent in the dark and you hear things rustling around outside your tent. You can feel, rest assured, that it's probably not a bear if you did the right thing with your food. Yeah, as long as you don't have food in your tent, your bear has no reason to go in there, so he's probably not going to. Animals typically don't want anything to do with humans, but it does happen if there's food around. So just definitely be animal aware and just know what's in the area that you're traveling in and what you need to be looking out for. But honestly, of all the times that I've been camping, I've never had any issues with negative experiences with any wildlife. So part of that is just doing the right thing, and part of that is the odds are just not in the favor of seeing something or having something go wrong with animals. Tip number 6 is to stay calm and confident. This is going to come with taking all of the necessary preparation steps, making sure that you've figured everything out beforehand and you can go into the situation confidently. If you're leaving feeling nervous, it's probably just going to grow as you spend more time out by yourself in nature. If you go into it confidently and you set yourself up for success, I really think you're going to be much better off than if you leave scared. There might be some apprehension, doing your first solo backpacking trip can be a little bit intimidating, but as long as you've taken all the preparation steps, you should be fine and you should be confident in your abilities to camp and survive the night or several nights depending on where you're backpacking and how long you're going for. And the next tip is to prepare for emergencies. I highly recommend carrying a personal locator beacon, a PLB, or some kind of satellite communicator. Personally, I use the Spot X. I'm pretty happy with it, but there are smaller, more packable options for this. But just something so that you can communicate with the outside world if you happen to be out of cell phone range. This is really important. I have had some things go wrong where having one of these would have definitely helped, and I didn't have one at the time with some off-roading stuff that I was doing years back. And that's what caused me to want to get one and realize like I'm doing some things that I could end up in an emergency situation where my life is at risk. So I should probably take that extra step and carry something with me so I can communicate with people. Again, you can use this to check in with people too. I wouldn't recommend saying that if you don't hear from me, start looking for me, because sometimes the messages don't go through right away and you don't want somebody expecting a message from you and maybe you can't get it out for some reason. And the message gets stuck on the satellite or whatever. So I wouldn't recommend telling people to expect to hear from you, but it is nice if you have the opportunity to just kind of check in and say, hey, I'm good, this is where I'm at, everything's going according to plan. And tip number 8, this is for every camping trip, not just solo backpacking, but that is to follow the leave no trace principles. Take all your trash with you, just do the right thing. Maybe clean up the campsite a little bit if there is trash around, just take it out with you. It's not a big deal and you'll leave it better than you found it. So this is kind of self-explanatory, and I know that if you're watching my channel, this is probably not something you need to be reminded of, but I'm just saying it anyway. Leave no trace and keep everything nice for the next people or yourself or whatever. And tip number 9 is to be aware of the weather and check the weather before you head out. You don't want to get stuck in the rain if you can avoid it, especially on your first solo backpacking trip. You want to keep things safe and easy as much as possible. Checking the weather beforehand. Don't get me wrong, things can happen unexpectedly. You could get a rain shower that you weren't expecting, but at least if you check ahead of time, you can know if there's like severe weather happening, and just avoid it altogether if you can. Just wait till the next weekend or whatever, but just be aware of it going into it. Know what to expect. And if you decide, maybe the weather says it might potentially just rain a little bit, then just make sure that you're prepared for that if you go anyway, and that you have rain gear and that you're able to set up your tent and everything without getting water on all your gear. And tip number 10 is to embrace the solitude. I have always really enjoyed camping alone and being out in nature by myself and kind of clear my head and think about life and different things and just really enjoy the time alone and enjoy my own company. It did take some getting used to, which is why I'm including this tip, to embrace that solitude and the aloneness of it. And it comes with a lot of confidence too. Having survived multiple campouts alone, you'll definitely find a confidence in that. And it's cool because the more you get comfortable with doing it alone, the less you're going to miss out on doing things because you couldn't find somebody to go with you. So anyways, those are my 10 tips for your first solo backpacking trip. Hopefully you found some of these tips useful. Don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.